You don't always have to go into the woods to practice your bushcrafting and survival skills. There are plenty of things that you can practice right here in your own backyard. Hey YouTube, I'm back for another Wilderness Wednesday and set up here again in the backyard base camp. Don't neglect your backyard base camp. It's a great place to practice a lot of skills when you don't have time to get out into the wilderness or out into the woods. I use it in particular to work on tarp shelters where I might not have trees to tie off to. So these are self-supporting in that I don't have to use a tree. This is one of my favorites for a lot of coverage. You can see how enclosed it is. This is called a tarp tent. For the tarp tent, you're going to need 7 stake points. There are going to be 6 around the tarp itself. 4 towards the back, 2 in the front, and then a guy line that comes out. And you're going to need 3 guy lines. I'm using the DD Hammocks tarp, the 3x3. This is one of my favorite tarps to use. It's very robust. It's a nice large size. I use it very often in my hammock camping. These are the guy lines that came with it, but of course you could just use paracord for any of these guy lines using the overhand loop to secure it to the tarp, and then also a taut line hitch or another tightening knot that you might use on your guy lines. Let me take you for a tour, and then I'm going to deconstruct it and we'll rebuild it so you can see how to construct it yourself. Here at the front we have the opening, and these are 2 of my tie-out points. And then towards the back, I have 4 more, and they're actually on the sides. Tucked underneath here is one of the corners, but I'm not using that corner tie-out point. I'm using the tie-out points just to either side of that in both the back and the front. I have the same thing over on the other side. And you can see the guy lines that tie out for these flaps. Now these flaps are not truly doors. I can't fully enclose this. Then I have a guy line that's coming out from there, and there's my stake point. Inside, it's supported with my trekking pole. You could source a pole out in the wilderness if you needed to, but I usually have my trekking poles with me, and this is a very handy use for them. Let me deconstruct, and then I'll show you how to build this thing, and then also take you for a tour inside so you can see exactly how big it is. So here's the gear that I'm going to need. Here's my DD Hammock 3x3 tarp laid out. As I said, this is one of my favorites. It has the 4 corner tie-outs that you traditionally have, and then it has 3 on each of the sides. This is what's going to be the back side for the tarp that we set up. And of course 3 on this side and all the way around. You can see my trekking pole there. And I have 7 stakes. I have some guy lines that are already tied and secured. I just leave those on the DD while I'm storing it. And they're always there and handy. What I'm going to want to do is I'm going to start with some stakes. My first stakeout point is I want to come in 1 from the corner on the back side. And I want to stake down into that for one of them on the back side. Then I'm going to come to the opposite corner and come in 1 again. So the middle one is going to stay empty, and I'm not going to use the corner. I'm going to stretch that out, get that taut. You are going to have to dress this again after you set this up. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stake that. With 2 more stakes, there are the 2 that I put in the back. Now I'm going to want to come back to the corners again, and I'm going to come 1 towards the front, and I'm going to stake those out as well. So 1 on this side, and again I'm going to pull it relatively tight. There's the corner there, and 1 in, and 1 in towards the front, and I'm going to tuck that corner in under there, and you're starting to see the shape come in. Over here, there's the one I already staked in the back. Corner, 1 towards the front. Pull it relatively tight. And stake in here. And I'm going to pull this pretty tight across the opposite direction. So there I have my 4 in. Let's tuck this corner. So there's my 2 in the back. 1 on that side, 1 on this side. Now let's do the 2 front stakes. Remember, on this tarp, I have corner tie-out point, then 3 on the front side, and another corner. So here I'm going to take this corner, and I'm going to come over and find this first tie-out point. There's the middle tie-out point, and I want to bring this corner about halfway between these 2 points. And I'm going to stake that at about that halfway between those 2 stake points. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Take that corner. There's my first tie-out point. There's my middle tie-out point, and I want to go about halfway between those 2. Now you're going to have to push your tarp back a little bit because, of course, you're taking up material there. Then pull that tarp in this way. Same thing over on this side. Pull it in. So I've tied in the back, and then I've tied 2 in the front, and it's made somewhat of a diamond shape. Now let's put our support in. I'm using my trekking pole, which is a nice rubber grip on the top, so I don't need to worry about it puncturing through my tarp. If I'm using a pole or a stick that I've sourced out in the wilderness, I want to take a sock, a rolled up sock, and put that over top of that to help protect my tarp. One other thing on these DDs is that reinforcement that I showed you earlier. Remember that you have tie-out points going from front to back. There's 1 at each edge, and then there's 3, 1 in the middle, and then there's 1 towards the front and 1 towards the back. I'm going to use that reinforcing as a place to secure when I put in my trekking pole. Now I take my trekking pole and I run the bottom section out to its max. And then I'll go about halfway on the top section. I'm going to lift up the tarp, and I'm going to look for that first tie-out point towards the front. I'm going to put the handle of my trekking pole in there. And push it up. Now I'm going to have to angle that pole towards the back a little bit where I stake it into the ground with the point. Then I'm going to go inside the tent and I'm going to lift the pole up a little bit. Let's extend it, and I'm going to extend it until it's pretty tight, but not too far for the pole itself. Here's my final stake. I'm going to run that out from that front tie out. And whether it's a pre-manufactured tensioning device or I'm using a taut line hitch, I'm going to pull that tight, and that's going to start to dress up my tarp tent. On each side, those flaps that we mentioned before with those tie outs, I'm going to take that and I'm going to pull it back, and I'm going to run it to that back corner stake. I'll do the same thing on the other side. Now as you look inside, you can see it's nice and roomy in there, but back where that 1 tie-out point is, you can see that it's sagging a little bit, and it can make it kind of tight to be in there. So that's where I'm going to dress this out a bit. I'm going to come here, and we'll pull this point back and tighten it. We'll tighten on this side. Pull it back. And then if I take these sides and tighten those, pull them out. You can see it's lifted up there a little bit. And this is what I mean by dressing out the tarp. Then I can come to these front stakes and dress those out. So that little bit of sag that I have there, what I've done is I brought that out and out a little bit. We'll do the same thing on the other side. Now you can see by dressing that, it's much more sharp in how it's set up. Let's dress the back a little bit more. We'll make sure to tuck this in. And that's dressed out pretty nice. I could stake down these tie-out points to close that area in if I wanted to. Here you can see where I've run up to that reinforced area. Plenty of room in here. I can store my gear. I'm well out of the elements. Get a ground cloth down here or my sleeping pad. Use my quilt or my sleeping bag, wool blanket, whatever my sleep system is. And you can see plenty of room. In fact, it's probably about the size of a two-person backpacking tent. I can sit up with plenty of room. If it's really inclement, I could get my cook stove up here in the front and cook. So, the tarp tent for this Wilderness Wednesday in the backyard base camp. Don't be afraid to use your backyard as your base camp to do practicing. Hey, get outside this weekend. You've heard me say it before, I'll say it again. It's impossible to be outside and stay in a bad mood at the same time. And hey, if you find these videos helpful, please subscribe. I come out with a new one just about every Wednesday for Wilderness Wednesday. Like it, subscribe, and thanks for watching.